A very good morning, students. In the last two videos on radius, we learned in the first video on the side determination and the anatomical position, and in second video we learned about the bony features of the radius. Now in this video we will learn about the attachments both of muscles and ligaments, and lastly I will tell you about the ossification of this bone. So this is the radius bone, okay, and this belongs to the right side. The upper end is here, the radial tuberosity is here, this is the anterior border, interosseous border is here, anterior surface of lower end, and this is the stellate process, okay, at the lateral angle, okay. This is the anterior border, and then if I will turn it, this another border is here which is rounded, is posterior, so this is the lateral surface of the bone. And then if I turn this bone completely, this is the posterior surface between the interosseous border and between the posterior border, okay. And here it is the lower end, if you can see it here, this is the lower end of the right radius, and this tuberosity which is a bulging on the posterior surface is the dorsal tuberosity, I say dorsal tubercle, okay. This is called as dorsal tubercle, okay. So we come to the attachment first onto the anterior surface of the radius. So this is the anterior surface between interosseous border and that of the anterior border. Now this is the median plane, so this is the medial side where the ulnar bone will come, and this is the lateral side. So the radius is the lateral bone. So I hope that the orientation is clear, and we then see the attachment onto the anterior surface. But before coming to the anterior surface, I will tell you the attachment of the radial tuberosity. As we have seen that the radial tuberosity is divided into two parts, an anterior smooth part where bursa is placed between the tendon and this tuberosity, and the posterior rough part. I think you can see now the anterior and posterior part of the tuberosity. This is the posterior rough part of the tuberosity, and this is the smooth part of the tuberosity. So this is the radial tuberosity. The attachment of the tendon of the brachialis, the biceps, tendon of the biceps is, okay, is here into the rough part, and between the smooth part, okay, and that of the tendon of the biceps which is going for insertion at this point is the presence of a bursa, okay, which minimize the friction during the contraction of the biceps muscle. So this is the insertion of the biceps, okay. Then if you see the insertion onto the anterior surface, this is the anterior part. In the upper part of the anterior border, this is the upper part of the anterior border, which is the rounded border, there is the attachment of the muscle called as the Flexor Digitorum superficial in its upper half, okay, of this anterior part. This is the attachment of the muscle Flexor Digitorum superficialis. I hope that you can see this part, yes. This is the Flexor Digitorum superficialis muscle which is attached. It is the radial head because it has the other heads also, ulnar head and the humeral head. So this is the Flexor Digitorum superficialis. Now from the upper two-thirds of the anterior surface, the whole upper two-thirds of the anterior surface, including this border, that is the interosseous border, up to this upper two-thirds of the whole anterior surface, it gives attachment or origin to another muscle which is called as Flexor Pollicis longus, because this is the radial side or the lateral side of the forelimb. So this is the Flexor Pollicis brevis, which will go to the thumb. So this muscle, second muscle which takes origin here from the anterior two-thirds of the anterior surface, which is Flexor Pollicis longus. Now then we come to the muscles muscle which is inserted onto the anterior surface. In the lower part of this anterior surface, near the lower end, okay, there is an insertion of a muscle called as the Pronator Quadratus. This is called as, because it is rectangular in shape, so it is called as Pronator Quadratus. And the insertion of this muscle also extend onto the anterior border, okay. So it just passes the anterior border here, okay, complete anterior border. It gives attachment, okay, insertion, because the origin is from the ulna, okay, anterior surface. This is the insertion of the Pronator Quadratus muscle, okay. I hope that this chalk is not that much visible, okay, as it should be, but then you can make out this is the attachment of the Pronator Quadratus. Let us come to the upper end of the surface, the lateral surface, okay, and here the upper end here just below the head, from the anterior aspect of the neck, then from the lateral aspect, lateral side of this radial tuberosity where I am drawing here, this is tuberosity, and then this is radial side, then on to the lateral surface of the upper end of the radius, and then the posterior surface, okay, then the posterior surface, and then going right up to the upper 1/3 of the shaft, okay. This insertion, okay, which is on to the anterior surface, lateral surface and posterior surface, is the insertion of the muscle called as supinator. So this is the muscle here attached, is called as the supinator muscle, okay. So this is the supinator muscle which is attached here. I will show you in the atlas also this attachment, because it is having a long extensive insertion, anterior surface, lateral surface and posterior. But this muscle comes from posterior surface and then winds around and then goes towards the anterior surface. Now see on to this lateral surface of the bone, where there is a maximum convexity of this bone is seen. There is a rough area, see in the middle, almost in the middle, and this rough area also gives attachment here. That means insertion of a muscle which is called as Pronator teres. So this is the insertion of the Pronator teres in the middle of the lateral surface of the bone. And if you trace this lateral surface much lower down, then just see this was the stellite process, and an area just above the stellite process, this area. Okay, this will give insertion to the strong muscle brachioradialis. So where I am just drawing, I mean say marking with the chalk this area, that is this area, lateral surface. Okay, this gives at a just above the stellite process. This gives the insertion of the muscle brachioradialis muscle. Okay, this completes the insertion and the muscles and origin of the muscles on both anterior as well as the lateral surface. Now we come to the posterior surface. So I have turned the bone. So you are seeing the dorsal tubercles indicating that this is the posterior surface, intraosseous border and posterior. So this will be the posterior surface. Okay, here is the attachment, that means origin of the two muscle in the upper 1/4 part, okay, here from the posterior surface extending up to the intraosseous membrane and then also extending on to the intraosseous border and to the intraosseous membrane. This muscle here, see this? This is a muscle which is called as Abductor, Pollicis, Longus. Okay, going to thumb, Abductor, Pollicis, Longus. And below this there is another muscle which is taking origin, okay, just below this, and this muscle is called as Extensor Pollicis brevis. So both the muscles which are taking origin from posterior aspect of the radius, they are going to the thumb. One is Abductor Pollicis longus upper, and the lower one is the Extensor Pollicis brevis. Now this completes the attachment of the muscles, okay, both origin as well as insertion. Now I will tell you the attachment of the ligaments, okay. Now in the ligament you see that our this border, that is the medial border, okay, intraosseous border itself, which is a short border. See this dark border where I'm just tracing my chalk here. This border will give the attachment to the intraosseous membrane, okay, which forms the middle radioulnar joint. Okay, so the intraosseous membrane is attached in its lower 2/3 where this border is present. It is not attached in the upper part, okay, intraosseous. So it is only attached into the lower 2/3 on the intraosseous border, okay. Then if you go to the lower end of this ulna, then you will see that the articular capsule of the wrist joint is attached to the margin, close to the margin of the lower end of the radius, okay, where I am drawing, very close. And then on to the posterior aspect here, this is attached. And then this is the ulnar notch, okay, this articular facet you are seeing, this is the ulnar notch of the radius which is present onto the medial side, and this articulates with the head of the radius. So to this margin, which is the inferior articular margin, and at the junction of this ulnar notch here, there is the attachment of the base of a triangular articular cartilaginous disc, okay, a triangular cartilaginous disc. So the base of the cartilaginous disc is attached here, okay, to this point, okay, to this ridge, okay, which is between the inferior surface, articular surface, and between the ulnar notch, okay, here of the radius. So this is the base of the triangular articular cartilage. Now, then this stellate process here, see this bony projection, this stellate process gives attachment to the ligament called as the radial collateral ligament of the wrist joint. This is the radial collateral ligament of the wrist joint. Then just above this, the anterior border here in the lower part, just here, see it here, this anterior border you can see on this. This gives attachment to the extensor retinaculum, okay. This is the attachment of the extensor retinaculum which goes on the dorsal surface, okay, and here it covers the tendons which are going into the posterior aspect of the radius, okay. So this is the extensor retinaculum which covers those tendons which are going. Now let us come to the see which are the tendons which are attached onto this bone. Now to the lateral surface, let me clean it, okay. So onto the lateral surface of the bone, see this is the lateral surface of the bone where a stellate process is present. On this lateral surface there are the two tendons are there which are close to the which are going to the thumb, directly going to the thumb. These two tendons were taking origin, these two muscles were taking origin from the posterior surface of the radius which we have seen. This is the abductor pollicis longus, okay, abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis, here they are going, okay. These are the two tendons which are going, abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. And then if you see on the posterior aspect, this is lateral to this dorsal tubercle. Dorsal tubercle is here. Then there will be the tendon, two tendon again will be passing. One is the extensor carpi radialis longus and another is extensor carpi radialis brevis, okay. So there will be longus and brevis. But then there is a tendon which is going just medial to the tubercle, lateral tubercle, dorsal tubercle, okay. And this tendon is again going to the thumb, and this is called as extensor pollicis longus. And then there are many tendons which are going most medially onto the radius. These are the tendons of the extensor digitorum, and one tendon is of the extensor indicis. Let me show you this from the atlas, where in cross section we can see how these tendons are going, okay, deep to this. I will have to search this, okay. Let me search this And these are the tendons going, I mean to say, posterior to the radial tubercle, I mean say posterior to the lower end of the radius. Just a minute, let me find it out where it is given. Okay. See, it is here, right. See, this is again the theme atlas, okay, atlas of anatomy, which I using you to show you some of the diagrams of the muscles and ligaments. Now see this. You can see this is the cross section of the lower end of the radius, and this is the cross section of the ulna, and then this is the lateral surface of the lower end of the radius, this is the posterior surface, okay, this is the anterior surface of the radius, and this is the anterior surface of the head of the ulna, okay, this is the stellate process of the ulna. We will see the tendon in relation to the posterior aspect and lateral aspect. In the lateral aspect, we have already learned that it is the abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis, which I have said that they take origin from the posterior surface of the radius. Only two muscles are attached on posterior surface. Then on the posterior aspect, these are the two tendons, extensor carpi radialis longus and extensor carpi radialis brevis. And then there is the tendon which is just lateral to, I mean to say medial to that of the dorsal tubercle. It is called as the extensor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis. Though it is placed much posteriorly, but it will go towards the thumb side after winding round this tubercle. Okay. Then there are the many tendons. These are the extensor digitorum tendon and then the extensor indicis. So extensor digitorum. So these are the tendons which are in relation to the lower end of the radius. Let me show you quickly the muscles which we have seen attached to the bone. Let me have some little zooming and then you can see. Now this muscle we have seen that at the most I mean say convexity on the lateral surface, there is the attachment of this muscle called as the pronator teres. So this muscle is attached onto the maximum convexity of the radius on its lateral surface. Then you can see here we have learned that this muscle Flexor Digitorum Superficialis, it takes origin from radius. So this is from the border, anterior border of this Flexor Digitorum, I mean say of the radius. So this is the Flexor Digitorum Superficialis and its radial head, because the other head ulnar and the this humeral head, they are on there. Now if you will detach this Flexor Digitorum Superficialis, then you can go to the deeper muscle which takes origin from the anterior surface upper to third, okay, and this is the Flexor pollicis longus, Flexor pollicis longus. And another deep muscle which you can see here in the lower end of the I mean to say this lower end of the radius, this is the insertion of the Pronator Quadratus is seen deep to the tendon. Here ulna, origin, and then up to the anterior border there is the attachment, and from the anterior surface of the lower end it is the attachment of the Pronator Quadratus muscle. Let me see if there are other, okay, yes. It is here. Then you can see in this diagram that this is the origin of the brachioradialis, which, see here, which was from the humerus, okay, and this brachioradialis goes down and it gets attachment to the stellate process of radius here. See this muscle, brachioradialis, which we have seen in the insertion, okay. So this was the brachioradialis muscle. And then lastly you see the attachment of the supinator muscle, which I have shown you. This is the attachment of the supinator muscle. So it takes origin from the ulna and then it attaches onto the posterior surface of radius, then it goes to the, I mean to say, lateral surface of radius, and it will wind round and then it will go to the anterior surface of radius. That diagram is not here, otherwise I would have shown you the insertion of the I mean to say supinator muscle. Now lastly I come to the ossification of the radius. If I draw a rough diagram here of the radius, this is the head of the radius, that is that articular disc is here, then this is the radial tuberosity, the neck of the radius, and roughly this is the shaft of the radius. Okay, so radius ossifies in cartilage. At the 8th week of intrauterine life, there appears a primary center of ossification in the shaft. Okay, 8th week of, and then this forms the bone which extend upwards and downwards. And then when the birth takes place, then by the end of the first year, there appears a secondary center for the lower end. So it is in the first year of age. So this is the secondary center which appears in the first year of age. And then at the age of 4th year of the child, then there appears another secondary center for the upper end of the, and this forms the epiphyseal bone, okay, the bone of the spongy bone of the lower end. And then this center, the diaphysis, which appeared, which developed from the primary center, and the center which have developed from secondary centers, they unite with each other, okay, at different time. Say for example, this was the appearance at the age of the 4th year. So the epiphysis and diaphysis, they will unite with each other around about 14 to 17 years of age. And then for the lower end, they will unite with each other, okay, by the age of say about 18 to 19 years, okay, of age. So which is the growing end of this radius? Now since the lower end appeared on the first year and the upper end was in 4th year, this is first to appear, lower end is first to appear. And this has united with that of the diaphysis between 18 and 19 years, okay, and it is later than 14 to 17. So this lower end is first to appear secondary center and unite last. So the lower end of the radius is the growing end. Thank you very much.